The young boy possessed a body that never aged and could not die. No matter how many times someone stabbed his heart, it would heal completely within seconds. At first, he believed it was a blessing from the gods, but after living for hundreds of years, watching everyone he loved grow old, fall ill, and die, he finally understood that this immortality was actually the cruelest curse. He was originally just a slum boy until one day, the yellow dragon chose him to become one of the 4 dragon warriors to assist King Fei Hong. That meant there were 3 other dragon warriors alongside him, and each one had a unique special power. The white dragon had a powerful dragon arm, able to tear weapons apart with bare hands. The green dragon inherited the strength of the dragon's legs. The azure dragon had a mesmerizing dragon aura that could paralyze enemies instantly. The instruments of the Qing Pine were dozens of meters tall, yet among these mighty gifts, the yellow dragon's power seemed the weakest. It only allowed wounds to heal quickly after injury, which was useless in actual combat. Even the true dragon never clearly told him what his power really was, so on the battlefield, he was always the one being protected by the other 3 dragons and the king. Under the king's leadership, the 4 dragons fought countless battles and built a powerful nation. Though the yellow dragon was the weakest in strength, the others never looked down on him. Even though they weren't blood-related, after inheriting the dragon's bloodline and power, they became like real brothers. King Fei Hong was like their eldest brother. Yet the longer the yellow dragon stayed with them, the more he felt he was the most useless warrior. Apart from a strong body, he had no power. The white dragon even mocked him, saying his body was only tough because he was still young. In frustration, the yellow dragon punched a huge rock, smashing it instantly, leaving everyone stunned. That's when King Fei Hong realized something terrifying. He hugged the yellow dragon tightly and entrusted his most important treasure to him. But the yellow dragon didn't understand why. Soon after, the kingdom was attacked again, and war erupted once more. But this time, the king only sent out the other 3 dragons and kept the yellow dragon by his side. Even with just 3 of them, they could fight off a powerful army. Knowing that the power of dragons couldn't be matched, the enemy used a war of attrition. Though they had dragon power, their bodies were still human. They would tire, bleed, feel pain, and die. While retreating with an unconscious azure dragon, the yellow dragon was ambushed and slashed badly by an enemy soldier. Just when he thought he would die there, his massive wound healed in seconds. It was the first time he realized his recovery was beyond normal. It was like he couldn't die. This wasn't human anymore. Years passed, the other 3 dragons began aging, and even King Fei Hong collapsed from exhaustion and illness. But the yellow dragon remained exactly the same as he was before, unchanged at all. Seeing his brothers age and weaken filled him with deep fear. The king seemed to notice something and shared his inner thoughts with the yellow dragon. The boy confessed that his body was strong, never tired or sick. Injuries caused pain, but they healed quickly, leaving no trace. Wasn't this more like a monster than a man? He kept asking the king what the true power of the yellow dragon was, but the king simply embraced him gently, unable to free him from this torment. A few days later, King Fei Hong passed away, and the 4 dragons cried bitterly before his lifeless body. After the king's death, the remaining 3 dragons were still sent to the battlefield. People began to think about seizing the dragon powers for themselves. They captured the azure dragon to use him as a servant, but thankfully, the white dragon and green dragon saved him in time. Since then, the azure dragon blindfolded himself and vowed never to use his dragon power again. He locked himself away in the shrine of King Fei Hong. The once glorious dragon powers had now become the trigger for war. They saw clearly how deeply humans craved this power. After discussion, they agreed to leave the kingdom and live in seclusion, but the yellow dragon decided to stay. He wanted to protect the nation that King Fei Hong spent his life building. He hoped to guide the young prince and would leave only after everything stabilized. The azure dragon silently watched them talk from behind, and before parting, the yellow dragon wished to see his eyes one last time. Beneath the white cloth still hid that unforgettable face. Though they were parting, they were still brothers of dragon blood. No matter how far apart they were, they would always be connected. The bond between the 4 dragons would never fade. After the farewell, the other 3 each set off on their own paths. The yellow dragon remained in the kingdom as a divine priest. Years passed. The white dragon and azure dragon found peace in the mountains and forests, while the green dragon wandered the world. Another 20 years flew by. The yellow dragon could still sense where his brothers were through their shared bloodline, but their auras were slowly growing weaker. During these decades, the kingdom faced internal disputes, but not a single soldier was lost. Because the yellow dragon didn't want King Fei Hong's people to suffer again, every time war broke out, he went alone to the battlefield. Using his undying body, he slowly wore down enemy forces. Each time he was injured, his body became stronger. His tireless battles and immense vitality struck fear into countless enemy soldiers. But now, the lives of the other 3 dragons were nearing their end. The yellow dragon could feel his brothers slowly fading away. He was heartbroken. It wasn't that he didn't want to see them, it was that he feared facing them as they aged while he remained unchanged. This loyal and selfless young man should have been loved by the people, but all he received was fear and rejection. The yellow dragon realized there was no longer a reason to stay. He chose a new divine priest and quietly left the royal city. From then on, the yellow dragon walked alone, with no direction direction, no destination, until one day, he once again felt the presence of the other 3 dragons, and only then did he realize that the dragon bloodline had never truly disappeared. As he looked at the young, innocent face not far away, Yellow Dragon couldn't help but remember the promise he once made to White Dragon, when White Dragon had said that no matter how many years passed, he would always wait for Yellow Dragon to come find him. But Yellow Dragon had never dared to face his aging brothers, and because of that, he missed the chance to see them one last time. At that moment, Yellow Dragon finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Rain poured down from the sky, and Yellow Dragon collapsed in the shallow water of the misty lowlands. He was so tired, so painfully trapped in a body that could not die, that he closed his eyes in agony until a girl appeared and saved him. When Yellow Dragon opened his eyes again, he found himself in a strange prison cell, and beside the bed sat a frail girl. Through her caramel-sweet voice, Yellow Dragon learned her name was Jiayin, and not only had she rescued him, she even shared her precious limited food with him. She warned him that if he didn't eat, he would starve to death, but she never expected his reply he didn't need food. Late at night, Yellow Dragon was startled awake by violent coughing, and when he rushed over, he found Jiayin coughing blood, crying in pain in her sleep. It turned out she had a chronic illness and had left her village to live alone just to avoid infecting anyone else. She gently urged Yellow Dragon to leave quickly, not wanting to harm him, but he refused, instead picking her up and holding her tightly. In the quiet little cabin, Jiayin softly asked for his name, and after a long pause, Yellow Dragon finally spoke. He said he had nearly forgotten his name because ever since he parted from his brothers, no one had called him by it for so long. Jiayin smiled and told Zenuo, "When you feel like you're forgetting your name, just call it out yourself, because when there's no one to talk to, calling your own name is a way to not forget who you are." It had been so long since he'd talked with anyone, and in that moment, they both felt so happy. So very happy. Again and again, their voices repeating, "So happy." In Zenuo's heart, peace finally returned, and with that calmness came clarity. She began to understand many things. She realized that no matter how much the world changed, life would always continue. The power of the divine dragon too would be passed on from generation to generation. The strength of the 4 dragons was always meant to protect King Feilong and the divine dragon. But now that King Feilong was gone, why had the dragon gods not taken back the powers of the 4 dragons? There could be only one explanation: that King Feilong would return, that he would be revived. This meant they could meet again, that the 4 dragon warriors would once more gather together. Even if they were no longer the same brothers, their blood would never change, and neither would the bond between the 4 dragons. In that moment, Yellow Dragon found his reason to live again. He only had to protect the kingdom that King Feilong built and wait patiently for the king's return. No matter if it took hundreds or thousands of years, he would guard it faithfully. Then, one day, a red light burst from the heart of the earth, and at that exact moment, the 4 dragons all felt a deep emotion stirring in their hearts. Zenuo had found the young white dragon, and together, they gazed at that glowing red streak in the distance. In their hearts, a voice whispered that this red light was the very reason for their existence. Before leaving, Zenuo didn't reveal her identity. She simply told the white dragon that his purpose was that red light. Then, through the bond between them, Zenuo found the young azure dragon. At the time, azure dragon wore a mask and always played alone, so Zenuo gave him a small leather ball and then quietly left. Lastly, she found green dragon, but the moment she saw him, she was struck by how cold and unfeeling he had become, because the once soaring green dragon now wore a silver mask forced upon him. Zenuo didn't speak. She simply covered him with a cloak and walked away. Across the vast grasslands, Zenuo walked on alone. She didn't know whether King Feilong's soul had returned to protect the kingdom, to build a new one, or simply to fulfill the deep yearning for the king's return. All Zenuo could do now was wait. And before she knew it, many more years passed. In the royal city of the kingdom of Gaohua, a princess was carefully preparing herself. Her fiery red hair glowed like the morning sky, and she was none other than King Feilong's handmaid, Princess Yuna. Thus began a new era of turmoil and power struggles. She was the most noble princess in the kingdom and the king's only heir. Her 16th birthday was approaching, and she had been preparing her look early because the man she loved, Su Feng, was finally returning. She was so eager and excited, and the moment she heard he had arrived, she rushed out of her room with joy. But as she turned a corner, she unexpectedly ran straight into Su Feng's embrace. Seeing the man who haunted her dreams, Yuna blushed uncontrollably. Su Feng gently stroked her hair, telling her to slow down. His voice was just as gentle as always. But this gesture deeply disappointed Yuna because it made her feel like he still saw her as a child, a feeling she had known since she was young. Back then, her mother had just passed away and little Yuna was heartbroken until Su Feng appeared. He draped a cloak over her, held her tenderly, and whispered, "Now you can cry freely." He stayed with her ever since, holding her hand until she fell asleep, wiping her tears the moment they appeared. In those darkest days, Su Feng's kindness was like a ray of warm sunlight, chasing away all the shadows around her. From that moment on, Su Feng's figure was etched into Yuna's heart, never to be forgotten. The next morning, Yuna went to Su Feng's residence, only to find it empty. From Min's, she learned that Su Feng had gone sparring with Hack. Hack was Yuna's childhood friend, brave and outstanding. Already one of the royal city city's youngest generals. Su Fang didn't stand a chance against him, but none of that mattered to Yuna because in her eyes, there was only Su Fang. She even offered to practice archery with him, and in the end, she happily sat in Su Fang's arms, her face glowing with happiness. Yuna truly believed they were destined to be together, but she never expected her father to strongly oppose it. He told her, "Since you were little, I've given you everything you ever wanted, except Su Fang. You are the only princess of Gaohua, and your husband will be the future king of this nation." Yuna couldn't accept this. She argued that Su Fang was the son of her father's older brother. He had royal blood too. But then her father told her, "Your mother died from an assassination." Did she want Su Fang to live every day in that same fear and danger? Yuna froze, stunned by her father's words. She wanted to argue, but no words came out. In the quiet corridor, Yuna collapsed helplessly to the floor, lost in thought. Could it really be that she was never meant to have happiness in this life? Just then, footsteps echoed from around the corner. She called out to Hack twice, but there was no response. When the figure stepped into view, Yuna panicked, her mind filled with memories of Meixin's assassination. Terrified, she dashed into the nearest room and slammed the door shut, only to have a hand suddenly cover her mouth. Dragged away from the doorway, she struggled frantically until a familiar voice finally broke through. When she looked up, it was Su Fang. In her rush, she had accidentally barged into his bedroom. Trembling, Yuna told Su Fang she had been attacked. Su Fang opened the door to check, but there was no one outside. Yuna became more anxious. She knew the attacker had fled, and now she was being targeted. She understood she should leave, or else Su Fang would be in danger too. But as she looked at his back, she couldn't hold back any longer. Su Fang's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, and she hesitated to even turn around. Blushing deeply, she fumbled with her emotions, unsure where they came from. She just knew that she could never again hold Yuna's hand as she fell asleep because now she would be too nervous to sleep at all. Looking at Su Fang, Yuna longed to tell her father that she truly loved him. Kingdom, throne, none of it mattered. Maybe she didn't fully understand politics, but she did know one thing. Being with Su Fang was the greatest happiness she could ever have. To celebrate Yuna's 16th birthday, the royal capital hosted a grand celebration. That day, Su Fang gave her an exquisite hairpin. Yuna was happy, but also disappointed. She disliked her fiery red hair, feeling it didn't suit such a beautiful gift. Su Fang was surprised, gently stroking the tips of her hair, and said tenderly, "I like your hair. It's a gorgeous red, like the morning sky touched by the first light of dawn." Yuna was stunned. This was the first time she felt her hair was actually beautiful. Her heart soared with happiness, and for a moment, she completely forgot about the looming threat of the assassin. That night, thunder roared and rain poured, but Yuna stood frozen before her mirror for a long time. Su Fang's words and her father's rejection echoed in her mind again and again. At last, she made a decision. She would go see her father because she couldn't forget Su Fang. But she never expected what she saw when she pushed open her father's door. Stunned beyond belief, she couldn't trust her own eyes. She even told Su Fang to quickly summon a witness, but Su Fang stepped forward and confessed everything. Not only was Su Fang of royal blood, her father Yufeng was the eldest son of the late emperor. He was brave, undefeated in battle, and beloved by all, making him the most favored candidate to become the next king. But 10 years ago, the emperor had passed the crown to his second son, Yuna's father, Yi. Su Fang had never understood why, but her father had been calm and accepting, and had once told her something that left a deep impression, words that made Su Fang proud of him. Back then, she told herself that one day, she too would walk onto the battlefield and use her life to protect her father and the kingdom. But she never imagined that once Yi became king, he would raise a blade against his own brother. Yuna's eyes widened. She refused to believe it. Her uncle Yufeng had died in an accident, but Su Fang told her that was a lie. He was assassinated by none other than King Yi himself. Now Su Fang was only doing what any child would do, avenging her father. She would take back his legacy and become the ruler of Gaohua. Yuna was completely shaken. She wanted to scream that this wasn't real, that it was a nightmare because Su Fang, who had always been so gentle, now felt like a stranger. Su Fang spoke again, saying she never wanted to hurt Yuna. That's why she chose to attack the king late at night. She asked curiously why Yuna was even there. Yuna went silent, then shut her eyes in pain. At this point, nothing mattered anymore. Suddenly, the palace gates burst open and the rebels stormed in. They urged Su Fang to kill Yuna. If she let her live, she would lose everything. Once she was marked as a kingslayer, how could she ever gain the people's trust? As Su Fang raised her sword, Yuna panicked, knocking over a torch. The fire spread instantly. In the chaos, Yuna fled the room, but the soldiers quickly followed. With nowhere to run, Yuna stopped, resigned to her fate. Her heart was filled with sorrow and confusion. Had she really been hated all this time? From a young age, she had loved Su Fang. She had never asked for anything, just to see her smile. That was enough. But now, Su Fang seemed like someone she didn't know. A soldier raised his sword, but just then, someone arrived. It was Hack, one of the 5 generals known as the Thunderblade. This was the first time Hack saw such a fragile princess facing such despair. When Yuna asked which side he stood on, his answer was firm. But the rebels didn't care. They demanded Hack kneel before Su Fang, who they claimed was the future queen. That's when Hack learned the truth, that Su Fang had killed the king. He was shocked beyond words and immediately charged at Su Fang, swinging his blade. He couldn't believe the one he had grown up with, the one who shared his dreams, had murdered the kind king. Hak was far too powerful. He was the grandson of the Wind Tribe's former chief and had inherited the title at a young age. His blade was as fast as lightning, earning him the name Thunderblade. Against Hak's fierce attacks, Su Fang could only retreat step by step. Then, in a dirty trick, a soldier grabbed the princess as a hostage. But just then, an arrow flew through the air, shattering the standoff. Hak seized the chance and escaped with Yuna. Along the way, they encountered Yuna's attendant, Minaz, the very one who had fired the arrow. To protect Yuna, young Minaz had put on her cloak, drawing all the attention to himself to buy her time. In the end, Hak successfully escaped with Yuna from the palace. But Minaz was struck down by a storm of arrows. Childhood sweethearts who once cared for each other now stood on opposite sides, all because one man killed the girl's father and stole her future. Yuna and Hak made it out of the palace, but along the road, Yuna became dazed and absent-minded, not eating or drinking, spending every day drowning in tears until she suddenly realized she had lost the hairpin Su Fang gave her. That's when she snapped back to her senses. But she didn't dare tell Hak and instead lied that she had something urgent to do, sneaking off alone to search for it. By accident, she wandered into Snake Forest, but luckily Hak arrived just in time and carried her to safety. However, during the escape, he was bitten by a poisonous snake. Hak knew Yuna still couldn't forget Su Fang, so he reluctantly gave her back the hairpin he had picked up earlier. He then brought Yuna back to his hometown, hoping she could live a peaceful life, hidden from the world in the Wind Tribe as a normal person. But things didn't go as planned. The elder of the Wind Tribe refused to support Su Fang as the new king, and in order to force his rise to the throne, Su Fang publicly declared that Hak had assassinated King Bo and taken the princess hostage. The Wind Tribe's elder didn't believe it for a second. He had raised Hak himself and knew Su Fang must have framed him. Defying opposition, the elder left the capital. However, without the support of all 5 tribal elders, Su Fang could not legally ascend the throne. So Su Fang sent the Fire Tribe to block the rivers, cutting off Wind Tribe's water supply, and even attacked the water merchants who provided for them, just to force the Wind Elder to submit. To prevent the Wind Tribe from being dragged into this mess, Hak pleaded with his grandfather to give in to Su Fang's demands. He even severed all ties with the tribe, returned his surname, and vowed to wander the world alone from then on. But Yuna was determined to go with him, no matter how much Hak refused. In the end, Hak gave in. He had never been able to say no to Yuna since they were young. If she insisted, he would always end up agreeing, and so the two of them set out on the road as fugitives. Before they left, the Wind Elder gave them one crucial piece of advice: find the Divine Priest, a man who could predict the future. It was said that whoever received his guidance would find their true path in life. But just 2.5 days into their journey, Hak sensed they were being followed. He told Yuna to stay quiet and promised to take her to the priest tomorrow. He could tell that at least 50 people were chasing them, and sure enough, they were soon surrounded. It was an ambush sent by the prince of the Fire Tribe, who had always harbored feelings for Yuna and dreamed of marrying her to gain the throne. But Hak was no easy opponent. He was one of Gao Hua's royal generals, known as the Thunder Beast, and his swordsmanship was lightning fast. True to his reputation, he broke through the encirclement quickly, but in a moment of distraction, the princess stumbled and fell. Hak, in saving her, was severely injured in the back. Still, he forced himself to lead her to safety before turning back to fight alone. However, his strength began to falter, and he was slowly overpowered. Yuna, watching this unfold, remembered how Hak had always protected her. She made up her mind. She wouldn't hide like a coward any longer. She grabbed a sword and rushed forward, slamming into the enemy about to strike Hak. Her eyes now flashed with fierce determination. The Fire Prince was shaken. He had never seen such a sharp and commanding princess, yet he still tried to convince Yuna to return to the palace with him and publicly reveal that Su Fang had killed the king. But Yuna saw through him. He only wanted the throne. Of course she refused. Meanwhile, the poison in Hak's body worsened. He grew dizzy and almost fell off a cliff. Yuna rushed to save him but was caught by the Fire Prince, who yanked her back by her hair. In desperation, she grabbed the dagger from his waist and cut off her long hair, which she had grown for years. She had already lost her beloved father. She couldn't lose Hak too. The Fire Prince was furious but couldn't bear to hurt her. Watching her risk everything to save Hak, he finally ordered his men to bring her back. But in the chaos of flying arrows, Yuna and Hak tumbled off a towering cliff. The Fire Prince was devastated. Yuna was the girl he had loved since childhood. In his grief, he almost followed her into death, but his guards stopped him just in time. Still, he couldn't forgive himself. That very night, he rushed back to the capital and told everything to Su Fang, who was about to be crowned. He confessed that he had caused Yuna's death and begged for punishment. But to his surprise, Su Fang didn't blame him. Wanting to win the people's hearts, she forgave him. Yet the moment she learned Yuna had died, a deep sadness appeared in her eyes. Her mood didn't recover for a long time. Perhaps in some hidden part of her heart, she had truly loved her. But for Su Fang, the throne meant more than anything. The next morning, Su Fang officially ascended to the throne, and the entire nation celebrated. The people had long grown tired of the former king's weakness and cowardice. They hoped Su Fang could lead Gao Hua to rise again. Meanwhile, the fate of Yuna and Hak remained unknown. So if you liked this this anime and want a part 2? Let me know in the comments. I'll upload part 2 right away.